Hello. I'm here to talk to you about a couple of recent visits I did to places where there was an interesting situation with dragons. Now, I'm very used to dragons being guides for people, being guides for me, for coming in and guiding and protecting. What I've not found, which is what I found recently, is dragons being trapped by frequency or density. But that's happened twice in really quick succession recently. So the first time I was in Somerset, I was in rural North Somerset on the coast with friends. Um, and I could feel an unsettlement in the land, in the ground beneath my feet. Um, I wasn't really sure what it was. It was not something that I'd felt before. It was indistinct. I couldn't yet put my finger on it. And then one morning I woke up, and before I opened my eyes, I heard someone say very clearly the words Divinos Forge Atongi, right? Or something to that effect. Now, I didn't recognize the language. You know, had no idea what it meant. Um, so cue some frenzied Googling. And I may have I had to write it down phonetically, phonetically. Um, so it took me a little while because obviously I only heard it and it was not a language that I spoke. But the nearest translation I could get to was Latin. And it roughly translated in a kind of pidgin Latin to I have forged divine things. And when I asked who it was speaking, I was shown a blue dragon, but he was in the land. He was in the ground beneath my feet in Somerset, beneath where my bed was. He was, it was almost like he was part of the land. And, but he wasn't like the dragons I'd previously experienced. He seemed sad and trapped. There was a sense that he couldn't move properly. There was a sense that he had been brought low, if you see what I mean. He was not energetically how dragons usually feel. He felt heavy and he seemed resigned, like I've got my notes here that I made at the time, and I've written stuck due to changes in vibration. I've written resigned, given up, waiting to die, but there's a sense that he can't. And so I did some work I asked my dragon that is in my spirit guide team, Gorkoreth, to come in and help free him. Because that's all you've got to do to move spirits on or to move anybody on is ask your spirit team. If you know a specific particular member of your spirit team that can help, particularly with a certain thing, like I did, then ask them. But if not, you can just ask your whole team out loud to come and help, or an angel, or whatever you're comfortable with. And I asked my dragon to come in and help and free him. And there was this great ripping, this almost like when you tear something really stuck like gaffer tape off a surface, and there's this real sticky resistance to pulling this dragon out of the land. And when I asked Gorkreth afterwards why the dragon was almost at one with the land, but in a restrictive way, not a oneness, harmony way. He said the weight of the actions of men had brought him low, and it had trapped him. And this wasn't something I'd come across before, but as in with all these things, it becomes obvious later on why you have had these experiences, because inevitably you find yourself in a situation where that is very similar and you have to do similar work. And that's exactly what happened. So after I freed this blue dragon, I saw him moving around, his energy shifted. He was with Gorkreth. Gorkreth took him off. It was all fine and lovely. And then, a few weeks later, I find myself on the Isle of Skye. And as soon as we arrived, we were staying in the north, near a place called Brothers Point, which is, the north of the Isle of Skye is very primordial. It's volcanic, so, it's got that fire creative energy, which turns out to be extremely apt. And so it is very primordial up there anyway. And I found myself there, and almost immediately on arriving, I felt in my body an unsettled feeling that I got when I first experienced Fae energy. Not fairy, but Fae energy. The humanoid, human-sized Fae energy. And it feels, your body reacts to it in a visceral way. It feels really wrong initially. You feel like you're somewhere you shouldn't be, meeting people you shouldn't meet. There's a real, if they haven't deliberately, enchanted's the wrong word, but if they haven't deliberately done something to make you feel at ease on an energetic level, your body has this reaction that is like primal, that it knows it's out of step, it's in a vibrational frequency that it shouldn't be. It's almost like when you see a big spider or a big snake, but without the fear, your body sort of does this lurch. It knows something is not quite right. And I'd experienced that the first time that I'd had Faye visit, and they'd not deliberately done a sort of energetic smoothing of the way. But it was literally just my body going, oh my God, what's this? And my body did that when I got to Skye. And it was when I got on the land just before the Brothers Point. It was way off the road. We were staying off the road in a rural place. It was quite near the footpath down to Brothers Point, but there was this strange feeling in the land, this lurchy otherness. And again, I couldn't put my finger on it. It wasn't familiar. And it's amazing, the scenery there. I'm sitting. There's this huge volcanic sort of scoop out of the land, almost like it's, a caldera, it's blown up from the inside out, big high volcanic rocks around you, and then green grass has grown in the dips there. And you can see far, far out to sea, and then sort of pastel coloured mountains in the distance that are all sort of pastel grey purples and pinks and things. Just, it doesn't even look real. It looks like a painting. And yet there was this feeling, and I sort of felt into it to try and understand what it was. And it was a dragon. And it was like, I could tell it was a blue dragon again. So whether there's something to do with blue dragons performing this role in the land historically, and something has changed, whether they were guardian spirits here, the blue ones, I don't know. I haven't quite worked it through. But there was a sense that it had like sort of withered like a plant, that it turned brown, that its scales, I could see, feel its scales. They were browning like a plant that's not been looked after. And it was really grumpy, really grumpy. It resented our presence there. It unlike the other one in Somerset that really had just resigned itself to the fact that it was going to spend eternity trapped in the land. This one was really angry about it and resentful, and not angry violent, but it was really grumpy. It didn't suffer fools. It didn't want any interaction. It was just like it resented humans for what they'd done to the land, that had changed the frequency of it, that had meant that it couldn't leave. And there was a great weight again. It was almost like when I felt into its energy, I could feel it being crushed. It felt again like there was this bondedness with the material earth itself, with the energy of this dragon, and it was being crushed by the weight of the land. And it resented people for it. And I hadn't come across this before. And if I hadn't have come across this scenario in Somerset only a few weeks before, I wouldn't have recognized this energy. It took me a minute as it was, but then I recognized what it was. Um, and and so I was about to call in Gorkreth again to help. Um, and just before I did so, the dragon said, "Hold on. There's something I want to say first." And this is what he said. "This is a land of blood. But what does that mean now? After everything and all, nothing and everything, over and over the same. And still the lesson is, now you can understand suffering through your own mortal experiences. How will you choose to move forward? Every second, every minute, every hour." The ancient trees understood this more clearly because they lived to see the broader context of their own reality. Your kind did once, and you will again. This is where you are. How will you choose to move forward? Each oar must choose a direction to move. Which way will you choose? And then he imparted into my mind this image of a great ship, an oar-powered ship, kind of like you would imagine the Romans and Greeks to have, where there's like hundreds of men with oars, and a certain percentage has to row in a certain direction in order to get the whole ship to move in that direction. And this dragon communicated with me that we sort of, even though we were moving in the right direction, we mustn't become complacent. We have to continually turn our oar to the direction we want to go, because the collective effort needs to be maintained. And the way he asked, which way will you choose? It was like he wanted us to consciously do that, to make an active choice. And he said every second, every minute, every hour, every day to strive to push in the right direction, or pull, if you're talking about oars, that pull in the right direction. I guess with pulling, there's a sense of you're taking other people with you if you're pulling, and if you're pushing them away. So I guess that's why he used an oar analogy, because you pull it, don't you? And that in doing so, individually but collectively, like oarsmen, we can move this great bulky object, the boat, the ship, or the vessel, the container for everybody, in the right direction. And then he said, create. And then I asked Korkrath, my dragon, to open a portal for him, so that this poor dragon, who God knows how long he'd been trapped there, and to help free him. And again, there was this resistance, this stickiness, not from the dragon himself, but from the land. It was like the land was holding on to him, like he was bound to it, but that it was no longer necessary for that to be so. And because dragons are very primordial, they are the creation energy, but in a basic components of the universe type of way, if that makes sense. And and that I found that interesting because especially in Scotland, because one of the great folk tales of Scotland is of the Stoorworm. And the Stoorworm is a great dragon who, when defeated, fell into the sea, and all the parts of him made up the isles and the mountains of Scotland. And I had found, I've been to Scotland many times, but not to the Isle of Skye, not that far north. And it was really interesting to find that actually there were dragons in the land there, and they were grouchy, and they were bound to the land. They did make up the land. Um, and as I opened this portal with Gorkarath, I won't take credit for doing it. I relied very heavily on another dragon in order to do this. It was so sticky, the energy. It really required a great energetic strength and a great being of energetic strength on a matching frequency in order to extract this poor creature. And as I did so, and as this portal opened, there was this drawing of other spirits who were also on that land at the same time, and they almost, not rushed because they were walking, but they were almost sort of drawn towards the portal. And there was what you would expect, 18th century farm workers and women in aprons and thick woolen dresses, and and shawls and head coverings. And there was these monks in black cloaks. They weren't druids, they were definitely monks. So what are they? Are they Benedictine friars? No, Benedictine are grey, aren't they? But black monks, whatever ordination those who wear black are. I know brown is Franciscan. Is grey Benedictine? I don't know. I don't know. Anyway, black monks. They weren't druids. They definitely weren't druids. Black monks, at least two, just came walking. The monks came from the sea. Well, they didn't come out of the sea, but they came from the area of the beach, and they came up the land towards the portal, towards the poor dragon that was trying to be pulled out. And all these farm workers just coming from all around, children holding sort of hay forks, just walking towards the portal. And they didn't have the same energy. The monks had quite heavy energy, um, but probably because their beliefs at the time, um, they struck me as being, I don't know, what did they feel like? 15th century, maybe 13th century. So they struck me as being, God-fearing, and that fear can create a lower energy. But the farm workers, they were quite happy, but they just hadn't had the opportunity to leave. And so there was this great, walking towards this portal as it was open, and everyone sort of disappearing into it. And as they did so, and as the dragon did so, the feeling, this kind of moody, gloomy, rolling clouds, dark, primordial, volcanic energy started to lift. And the feeling of the land started to feel completely different. And it almost felt meadow-like and summery. Well, like it should have done, really. It was a summer's day. And when I asked Gorkreth, when everyone was gone, to close the portal, and I took a picture of it, so I'll put a picture up here on the video. This vertical rainbow appeared, shooting up from the land directly in front of where I'd opened this portal, right up into the sky. And automatically, I sort of did an intake of breath and went, oh, Bifrost, the rainbow bridge of the Viking things. And of course, I suddenly thought, oh my goodness, Vikings, they would have been here too. And I haven't thought of them. And so I asked Freya and Udin to come in and open a portal for them, because obviously they wouldn't recognize angels and dragons and all this sort of thing. And as I did so, this vertical Bifrost bridge turned into a double rainbow, which I also took a picture of. And there was this feeling of such relief. It was almost like, oh, you remembered, you remembered us as well. And I didn't see any Vikings, but I could feel, because I got the feeling that they were in the water. But you could feel the energy lift. And then this beautiful rainbow stayed there for ages. So I'll put pictures up, you'll be able to see this amazing energy shift that happened. And then after that, as we stayed there a week, the feeling in the land was completely different, completely different. It didn't have any of that, primordial, moody energy at all. It was completely lifted. It was completely different. And I thought, gosh, I hope that people, when they come here, don't think the magic's gone, you know? Don't think that volcanic primordial energy that it had is made it lesser, because it was very markedly different. But there is a sense that, just as Gwyn ap Nuith talked to us about freeing the women in the stones, the druidesses that were bound to the stone circles and the standing stones to protect them energetically, that it's time for them to leave. It would appear that there are dragons in the same situation that were here as part of the creative energy, that were here, were part of the energy when there was still magic in the land, shall we say. There's always magic in the land, but when it was part of our everyday life, it was normal. And that something had happened that sort of crushed them and imprisoned them, and that we need to help them. We need to help them leave. They need to leave. And once they're free of the land, they can come back again. They can serve as guardians and be in the energetic realms, that they're actually not able to perform their protective and guiding role as we move into our next phases of evolution and our next yuga cycle, that they need to be freed from that very 3D prison that they were in order to help us and move forward. And actually this dragon was so grateful, and he was blue as well, and he was soaring around and, you know, sort of roaring, but with the joy, with Gorkress. And they did this great greeting where they sort of, their serpentineness, they sort of uh, encircled each other and almost did this sort of dance where they swerved round each other. It was really joyous and wonderful. So I'd be interested to know if you know that area of Skye at all and you go there, if you sense that it's different, hopefully better, but it will be different. And let me know if you can feel that, and if things in that area start to shift, and yeah, uh, let me know if you've had any similar experiences with dragons recently, and if you come across a dragon in the land that is grouchy or heavy, please help them. Please help them out, because dragons are very kind and supportive. They can be no nonsense, yes, but they shouldn't be um, energetically grouchy. They shouldn't be heavy. So if you come across this, please ask your dragon or Gorkreth, you can call him in, to help you free them and do this work that I think we're all being called to do. But it takes people who I think have already had these experiences to notice and spread the knowledge to others that it's time for the dragons to evolve or be freed, the ones that are trapped, not evolve, because the ones that are free are totally fine, but it's time for the ones that are earthbound to shift. And that work is so important. The fact that immediately after, literally seconds after I did this work, this huge vertical rainbow appeared in exactly the place where I'd done it. It's like the universe saying thank you. So please take on this work if you are able. It's really important. It seems really important at this time and what being called to do. And please leave in the comments, any work you've done similarly or that you find yourself being called to do. And please don't hesitate to get in touch if you need any help or advice doing this kind of work.